do that, eh? So welcome to Keepers of the Light. Tonight we're talking about Jainism. I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm unmuted. I know. It's like it takes me a few seconds to get used to my own kind of routine that doesn't seem to be apparent to anybody, including me. So we're looking at Jainism tonight, and I don't know if anybody here has heard of Jainism or knows much about it, but I love it. It rocks my socks because we are talking pre-Christianity. We're talking 600 years before the birth of Christ, and we're talking the formation of something here that splits into just about every part of philosophy, religion, spiritualism as we know it today. We're very aware of certain things. So the Jainism itself got split at some point because there were arguments in the ranks. And you can see by looking at these ancient philosophies exactly how we ended up with so many religions on the planet. And I think it's really important to look at it, not just religions, but different methods of philosophy, different methods of spiritual belief. If you look at the Theosophical Society and the Rosicrucians, and we've got all of these different things, and it's really interesting to me that as a global phenomenon, that's humans, as a global phenomenon, as a thinking, intelligent phenomenon, as a spiritual seeking phenomenon, we don't seem to be able to just embrace all of it, right? You know, we've got a real problem with that. We've got a problem with just going, it doesn't matter. We don't need to create a sectarian society. We don't need to create a society that determines this one is more right than that one. And when you look at what split Jainism, I think it's an amazing thing to look at something so small that created the division. Now, Jainism is far from dead, so I don't want to give you the impression like the Golden Dawn that it actually went out of favor, because it really didn't, but it did split into two separate factions. So let's have a look at them. You know, they've got the most beautiful thing going on. Check this rock out and see how they've carved into it. This is, we're going to look at these, the 24, I've got to work out how to say it properly, Okay, you ready? Two Sankaras, I think, but that's as close as I'm going to get. And these are all carved into rocks, and you'll see these carved into any amount or made out of marble, especially black marble, carved into rocks. I mean, it's an amazing thing when you look at India and you look at the ancient philosophies. They're modernly calling it a religion, but the Jains themselves say they're not a religion. And so I'm going to adhere to what they say about themselves rather than what Wikipedia or other sectarian groups do. But they are definitely separate. They definitely have a philosophy. They definitely don't adhere to that insofar as you don't have to adhere to more than 5 things. So they've got 5 things. That is their laws, if you like, just as you may look at the 7 commandments, the 12 commandments. Where did I get that from? More rules. They do have 5 tenets, but their tenets are about how you live life rather than about what you should or shouldn't do, except for chastity. Chastity is pretty much a don't do sex thing, but a really interesting philosophy. That's a really big stone, by the way. I was really wishing and hoping that I could find one with a person standing next to it, because a person's going to be very, very little standing next to that. So it dates back to the 6th century BC and, of course, in India. It derives its name from the Jinas. Now, this is important to me because we've all got used to listening to things, and I'll show you at the end there, the jinns, you know, the jinns being the genies, turned into the genies. There is no doubt, even if you look at old stories, that the jinns themselves, the genies themselves, are always ethnic. They're always of Indian-style origin, Eastern origin, Asian origin. They're never really European. And that's because we come from a particular space and a particular thing. But the name Jinas actually means conquerors, and it's not conquerors of other people, not even close to conquerors of other people. This is another rock with the formation in it. Just amazing detail. Look at the detail in that. It's phenomenal. And what you've got there is there's 24 of these Tirthankaras. I know I'm saying that wrong, but we'll get over me, won't we? I get myself into these sticky situations. And basically, where you go, the word in Sanskrit means forge maker. That's to forge your way. through to the next way of being, the next existence. Now, if we have a look, if you go through here, you'll see this guy in the middle. There's one big one and there's all the rest. He's the last one. So these Tirthankaras, these Jina, they represent an age. Each one of those 24 represents an age, and we are now in the age of the last Tirthankaras, and then they recycle again, okay? And they will name the next 24. So they're not the same names going through and through and through. It's really fascinating when you start thinking, okay, we're talking a very long time here, a very long age of recording, saving, developing a philosophy. So while we're talking about 600 BC, we're only talking about the last age, which means we go back a long way before that when we're talking Jainism. Now, in Jainism, a savior who has succeeded in crossing over life's stream of rebirth has made a path for others to follow. And this is where the Jina comes from. This is what the Tirthankaras are. They have done it. They are what in modern spirituality you would call a master. A master is one who has is actually adhering to this philosophy, really. Philosophy is that you incarnate through so many different lifetimes, and then once you have mastered everything in the lifetime that you could possibly master, then you become the Jina, and you become the way shower, the forge shower. You get to teach other people how to do that, and it is a lifetime thing. It's not a 5-minute or a weekend or a $20 thing. It's a lifetime thing. And I find it really fascinating because these people live that as a teaching. They're not born into it per se. Mahavira, long Buddha, about 300 years before Buddha, did the same thing. He was a prince. He gave it away. He was told, or he believed he was the last Jina of this age, and he abdicated all possessions, and so that's part of what Jainism is about. And his name is Mahavira, and he was the last to appear of this age. Now, according to tradition, his predecessor, which was Parshvanatha, lived about 250 years earlier. So there's about a 250-year time frame between lifetimes of each of these Jina. Now we're talking some pretty serious time, as I mentioned. And in the Jain scriptures, there's an interesting thing that modern interpreters and scholars do is they say, oh, the last couple of we can call people. Before that, they're just mythological. They're not real. And I don't know why they would go there, except that archaeologically speaking, spiritually speaking, religious speaking, most of this comes out of religious-based scholarships. And, of course, there's a belief there of Christianity, I should say, not religious-based, that there's only a 5,000-year history to the earth, even though we've got an actual record of more than that. The thing here is that because these guys are talking about such an enormous period of time, they're going, no, it can't be. And it's the same with the Egyptian pyramids. Actually, there's a lot of talk along those lines too. So they've decided to develop a period of time that looks real, and that's the last two, and after that, So there's 24, the first of whom it is an age of descending purity. And this is really interesting to me because when I first started my own personal journey, I was told very clearly by Nathaniel that we start at the top and we work our way to the bottom, and then we go back to the top. And once we've got to the bottom, we work our way back to the top. And I always found that very interesting. And I did not hear this from a person, and I did not read it in a book, and we're going back quite a lot of years now. But when I heard that, I just sort of thought, okay, so the theories on reincarnation are that you sort of come back as a lesser being or a better being, or you've got to have all these life lessons. But none of that fit, in actual fact, until I found Jainism. And I'm not an adherent, by the way, but until I found the Jainism, then I understood what I'd been told, actually, that it's a journey through many different states of being. And once you've experienced all of those states of being, whether it's in one lifetime, so this is important, whether it's in one lifetime or multiple lifetimes, if you believe in reincarnation, until you've experienced all of them, you cannot consider yourself a master. Okay, so you can be a master of one thing and one aspect, and you see this in the Kabbalah as well, the tree of life, is that you're mastering different aspects, and they've got their 13, right? And so you're mastering each different aspect, and you're not a master until you have mastered all of them. And so here we've got these 24 aspects. It's a bit harder, isn't it, when there's 24? That's a crack up. There's 24. Oh my God! Now these are all over India. These are the Tirthankaras. These are the Jaina, and these are in black marble, and they're always depicted standing or sitting. If they're sitting, they're usually sitting on what they call a lion's throne. And it's just like, to me, the most fabulous, amazing thing. If you ever go to India, go to one of these temples, one of these Jain temples. They're not in every temple, just Jain temples. And when you go to them and you stand in front of these, you can actually feel the energy coming off them. That isn't about the carving. It isn't about the statue. It's about the energy of understanding that's passed on religiously from generation to generation to generation. We've lost that art, of passing on tradition. We've lost the art of passing on deeper learnings to our children. We let them go out and learn them somewhere else. I often see on Facebook, this post comes up all the time over the last few years, do you think growing gardens should be taught in schools? And I never click on it. I'll never tick it. I'm not interested. No, you parents should teach your kids how to garden. You should teach your children the value of naturism, of living, of life. You should teach them what it's like to look after a pet or an animal. You should teach them what it's like to grow food for yourself and what it means to do so, what it tastes like, what it feels like, the effort that goes into it, and so on. We're really only teaching kids about buying stuff or receiving stuff, I suppose. And I'm not dissing, I'm just saying we've lost something here that's quite valuable that the Eastern nations and philosophies really haven't lost. And that's why it's so strong there. It's that strong because it's reiterated, it's reinformed, it's pushed through in a constant and ongoing manner. It hasn't been switched up too much. This is still the Jainas, so they're always going to be depicted either sitting like this, mistakenly thought to be Buddha, by the way, by a lot of Westerners when you see stuff like this. It absolutely is not. You are seeing the four faces, and then there'll be another one a bit further up. There'll be 24. There's always 24. Okay, there's never just one. You can't just have one. When they're standing stiffly, when I showed you this one back here, it's considered the pose known as chaos saga, and that is dismissing the body. So it's a stiff standing pose, essentially, and it's one that is undertaken by their members. And it's a fascinating thing to me that the dismissal of the body is by standing in the stiff, erect posture. And of course, we all recognize the other one, and we don't doubt for a minute that this is like the yoga lotus pose that's come forward and that's used in modern ways. And it's called the seated cross-legged. It's the posture of meditation, and it's always what they call a lion throne. So this here is called the lion throne, and please look above, see the halo, way above the head. It's not a hat on the head, it's a halo held above the head. And the gold is important because as you go through the different Jaina, you'll notice that gold is a repetitive, representative color. And of course, we think of gold as transformation. So you're transforming from this state to the next state. One state is not necessarily better than the next state. They're different. They're not worshipped as gods. They're not worshipped as Christs, capable of giving blessings or interfering with human events. They're not treated in that way at all. Jain believers pay them homage as representatives of great beings in the hope that they may be filled with the sense of renunciation and the highest virtues, and thus encouraged along the path towards their final liberation. So they see these as the way showers for spiritual liberation, which is a fascinating concept in itself. When you look at the gurus, that's why in India they attract thousands upon thousands of followers. These people just want to touch them, be near them. They want what they've got. And you get the same with psychophants, people that hang out with successful people, people who hang around psychics and spiritualists, the people who hang around motivational speakers. They want a bit of what they've got. And of course, these people, if they get into that position, they're in a position of teaching. They're in a position of teaching personally. They're in a position of teaching multiplicity with a whole lot of people. But the Jains have this huge cosmic understanding from thousands of years ago. So we are talking a legitimate over 3,000 years ago, possibly 6,000. It's a lot of years we're looking at here, and possibly more. So we can only go, hiya, Kathleen, buddy, hiya, Corrine. Is it? Okay, no problem, you're here now. Now, when we start with the first stage, and I'm just going to read through these fairly quickly because I don't want to bore you, and there are 24, but I want you to get an idea of the concept of the jinas, of the masters, of the teachings, and what they represent. And we've got the first one, and I will give you the full one of that. That's the Rishabhanasa, is the first jina, and of course it's represented and called, that means Lord Bull, by the way. Hello, baby. And Lord First. So it's Lord Bull or Lord First. And his emblem is the bull, of course, and the colour is golden. And it also, then we move to the second. Now the second one is Invincible One. And this is what they're mastering. So remember that. These are what one must master to go through the 24 jinas and to become a master. And each one of these ages represented that. So you've got an age that lasts something like 250 years, okay, somewhere in there, plus the lifetime of the master himself. So that could be 70 years, it could be 100, it could be 50, I don't know. We only know that the last one, Mahavira, lived to be 73 or thereabouts, it's written. So we go to the third one is Auspicious. We go to Worship. So these are what you must master: auspiciousness, worship, wisdom. There's Lotus Bright. There's Good-Sided. That's where you must show all your faces to the sun, to the light, if you like. It's Jainism that the swastika comes from, by the way. It's not Buddhism. It's not out there in that way. It comes from Jainism, and they've got 2 or 3 representations of it, which I will show you. And I will show you the meaning. I've got them there. Then there's Moon Bright. So you've got Good-Sided, Moon Bright. You've got religious duties. Or Blossom Toothed, by the way. I don't know how those two go together. You've got Good, and it's represented by a rhinoceros, believe it or not. You've got Worshipped with offerings of possession. So that's dispossessioning. That's a big deal for them. You dispossess. You detach. You recognize all of these terminologies. You've got Clear. And, of course, Clear was taken and used by, what's his name? Ron L. Hubbard, where you got to a point and you became a Clear. And I can remember even when I did the work for that through the mediums, the heroes and the hoaxes, when I did the work for that, and they were talking about Clear, and all the articles said, he invented that, da-da-da. He did not. It's already there 6,000 years ago, sort of a thing, or at least 3,000 years ago. And it's the boar, it's golden. So you're starting to see these animals. We've got Endless, which is the hawk. Then we've got a different sect. They did split later, which became the ram or the bear, because as soon as you get something splitting, everybody then isn't being authentic. They want to take away something and make it different to what the original is, to show their separation, to show their sectarianism, which is really, really interesting. We've got Dharma, which of course is duty, right? That's what Dharma means. You see Dharma a lot written as like your path, your golden path, your spiritual path. It's never been that. It's always been duty. What is your duty to the world? And it's represented by the thunderbolt. We've got Shanti, which is peace. We move on to meaning uncertain, which is Kuntu. Nobody seems to know exactly what it means, but it's goat and it's golden. We've got division of time. So that's mastering time, understanding divine timing. And that's a very elaborate swastika. They've got a few swastikas. And then, of course, if we move to the next Digambara sect, it becomes a fish. We've got the wrestler. That's where we wrestle with our egos. We wrestle with what we understand and what we don't know. Then we've got of good vows. That is to be authentic, right? That's to be, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're honest. It's not just honest, it's more than that. That's to be, begins with I. Come on, tell me. What's the word I can't find? To be, Jackie, come on. To be, integrity. That's the word. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. To have integrity of good vows. That means you keep your promises. Then we've got bowing down. That is to give away something of yourself to take on something larger, right? You bow down to the greater good, to the larger something. And then, believe it or not, at 21, we've got something called eye winking. Like that. Eye winking. I'm not quite sure what that's meant to be, but I do remember a New Zealand artist, Tony Fomerson, who has a beautiful painting, and he's got it's like a jester. you know, and he's got a very large head, and he's holding a hand, and on his hand he's got man. He's got a man, and he's got the words that he's saying in a little speech bubble is, what shall we tell them? And I always knew with Tony, because he was a real nutter, that meant this is God, or this is some greater representation of the cosmos, and it's that, you know, what shall we tell them? Let's make it up as we go along. And in it he's winking. We've got the rim of whose wheel is unhurt is number 22. And it's kind of phenomenal when you think about what is the rim of whose wheel is unhurt. What does that mean? And I think that means cycles maybe. And then we've got the Lord Serpent, and that's that learning. That's the serpent always means knowledge and learning. And then, of course, we've got the final age, which they're in now, so we're in this now, and it's the age of Vardhamana, which is later called Mahavira, after Mahavira himself, and it is the age of prospering, by the way. And so we've been in the age of prospering now for 250 years because he died. No, we haven't. We've been in the age of prospering since he's noted as the last one since 600 BC. For 3,000 years, we've been in the age of prospering. So if you're looking at, there's 250 years traditionally between the ages or the eras, and he's considered the last one. We're talking somewhere in the region of 6,000 odd years per age, per 24. It's mind-boggling, 24 Jina. And so when you start thinking along that, you get this, like the Mayans, you know, this conceptual understanding of time being larger than a lifespan by a very long way. There's a plan ahead. They know at the 15th Jina that there's going to be 24, and then it's going to go all the way through to there, which is really fantastic. There's cycles of an era, and we seem to have lost that, and the Christians have definitely not developed it or got it. So the Mahavira, we'll look at that one because he's like the last one. These are some more Jina. They're just so beautiful. They're colourful. They're always marble, by the way. They love putting them out there in marble. This is another Jina and outside. Now, this is what I mean about the size. These are the people there. So if you can imagine how big these things are and can be, and they're all over the place. Really beautiful depictions, and there's no doubt that that's a lotus position. The ultimate goal, obviously, the Mahavira means, his name means great hero, by the way, and he's represented by the lion, which is why you'll see that on the lion throne. Now, all of the colours through all of these, pretty much without any separation, is golden, and golden is commonly thought to be, of course, bonding. It's flexible, but it's also considered the color of transformation. And this is this is a Jain temple. They're ornate, but look how open it is. Again, they don't stop anybody worshipping in their temples. This is something to do with India itself. There's such a huge tolerance of different philosophies and beliefs. So the ultimate goal of Jainism is the liberation of self, which is jiva. Okay, and this is where we get the jins from. So from rebirth, so it's liberation from rebirth, which is attained through the elimination of accumulated karma. So what happens is through these mastering of different things, you get rid of all your karma, and you see this belief in modern spirituality all over the place. So you get rid of the accumulated karma, which is the consequence of previous actions. And this occurs through both the disciplined cultivation of knowledge and control of bodily passions. And when the passions have been utterly conquered and all karma has been removed, one becomes Jina, and that is the conqueror. That means you have conquered karma. You've conquered rebirth, reincarnation. Marie, the carvings on the building remind me of a beautiful temple here in Southern California that is Swamavarian Mandir. Everything hand-carved, it is breathtaking. The few times I've gone, I feel renewed, refreshed, like a cleansing. They do feel that way. Hey, I mean, it's the same in Thailand and Asia when you go to the temples. The history in their temples, it isn't something, you know, you do feel it in certain churches, but it's not the same, and where everybody comes for a common purpose. But there's, I don't know, there's a deeper sense of offering in Indian temples. Like they go there to give, not to get. You know, they don't go there to be validated, to be forgiven, to confess their sins. They go there to pay homage, and I think that's the power of the the energy and the feeling. And when you have a look inside, look at that. Everything's hand carved. And actually the Jains do have some very big representations in the United States and in Europe. Everyone is smiling, exactly. Their smiles alone are welcoming. There's no guilt. Everything's about, I'm giving, I'm here to learn. It's that understanding of what they're there for. They're not in the temple to serve a god per se, or to bow down to a Christ, or to revere a minister. They're in that temple to be and feel that they can gain something, give something. They never go to a temple without an offering. Nobody in Asia does, India or any of them. They always take an offering. Now, it's not an offering to the temple per se. They can give to monks and they can give to individuals, but they give to the representations themselves. They stick gold on things. Nobody takes that off ever. It goes into the temple. It becomes a part of this whole energy of giving and sharing. They are the most amazing things. I'll make that larger so you can have a look at some of this work. It's a little bit blurry up large, but check the detail out. Oh my goodness. It's just phenomenal. Well, Christianity is founded on intimidation, really, which is the problem. It's founded on a whole group of writings that were brought about by the Roman Empire. The Bible is an instructed construction to stop different religions. This is what I mean about sectarianism, which has developed worse. It's become more prominent through the ages. There was a time that nobody cared if people worshipped their gods. They might rubbish them, but that was your business. And then it became suddenly everybody else's business. We don't want you worshipping your gods. We want you worshipping ours. And the very concept of that is flawed. The very concept of that is that. Oh, did it? Oh, that's a bit strange. Anyway, so we've got this here. Now, the last, he's considered, the Mahavira, the last one, is considered to be the bringer of Jainism to the modern world, but not the origin of Jainism, because clearly he's the 24th, right? So it's the 24th over a period of some give or take, thousands of years. He's clearly not the first, but he's the one that's put it down in writing. He's the one that's spread it around, and he's the one that we have a modern take on today. And so there we go. When we are trying to relieve ourselves of karma, we are essentially engaging in the new age, which isn't so new when you start looking at the origins of these teachings and you realize that while we're being taught this as new age philosophy, it's very old indeed, which I do keep saying, let's go to the next thing here. Now, I'm showing you an old naked man for a reason. And clearly from his smile, they've asked him to cover his bits for the photo. But this is the monk style of what they did. Now, the venerable ascetic Mahavira, which is how they refer to him, for a year and a month wore clothes. After that time, he walked about naked and accepted the arms in the hollow of his hand. For more than 12 years, the venerable ascetic Mahavira neglected his body and abandoned the care of it. He, with the equanimity bore, underwent and suffered all pleasant or unpleasant occurrences arising from the divine powers, men, or animals. Now, this is from the Kalpa Sutra, which is their canonical text. They call it canonical, and I'm like, yeah, really? But it's their doctrine, it's their way of living, their philosophy, if you like. So he did this for 12 years and spent the crucible of unimaginable, this is how it's written, the crucible of unimaginable austerities and meditation. Mahavira reached omniscience as Arjuna, one who has shed all karmas, and used the remaining years of his earthly life teaching the path of the Jinas as the 24th Tirthankara. He reached the final liberation, which is called moksha. Now, does that sound a little bit familiar to anybody? At the age of 72. When you look at acupuncture, they have a thing called a moksha stick. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Have you heard those as well? This is aside from the Jewish connotation, the Jesuit connotation. And the moksha stick is like a little cone, and you light it at the end. It's made of herb compressed, okay, like really tightly compressed. It almost looks like an incense cone, but it's not, and it's quite a bit longer. It would probably be as long as my finger. You set it alight at the narrow end, and you hold it over a particular point, depending on what it is. It could be above the lip, it could be at the navel, it could be at the wrist, at the neck, or the ear. Now, when you hold it above that point, the most amazing thing happens. You almost feel the heat. Now, you're not holding it too close. You're holding it off at about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. And as you do, for whatever reason, the point of heat drills right in deep. You can almost feel it go all the way through your body, wherever it is. It doesn't matter if it's your wrist, it doesn't matter if it's your belly. Clearly, there's a different thickness of tissue there. And you can feel this moxa stick. His bits as hurt. No! We're going to be talking about Ohio in a minute if you're not careful. The interesting aspect of these words is that they seem to have a fairly common origin if you go back far enough, and while they have slightly different connotations as you go a bit further on, things change a little bit. Now, as Mahavira lived so long ago, this is clearly not him, but this is a modern and very real Jainist monk doing what Jainist monks do, and that means he's wandering around naked forever. Okay, as it stands, or at least 12 years. I don't know after 12 years whether you could even consider putting clothes on. Wouldn't it be like this horrible thing? Jainism conceives of a multi-layered universe containing both heavens and hells. You see this philosophy too. I brought it out in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. If you didn't see or hear that show, go and have a listen to it. You've got this multiple universe. Multiple universe. Now, the interesting thing of their cosmology is that with all of these different universes, we talk about multidimensionality today, again, as if it's something new, but here we are looking at it thousands of years ago with the number of heavens, the number of hells. There's not just one of anything with Jainism. There are these multiple layers, and each one can be accessed or understood by your development, by your mastery, I guess. And then as you can move into each universe, the question becomes, is the universe essentially the different quadrants of our mind, which in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they keep saying, you're going to see these demons, they're all going to come at you, and it's going to look very scary. And then they say, but this is just your mind, this is just your brain. So they're very clearly acknowledging that it's not out there, it's in here, inside yourself. Really interesting. You saw the word Jainism painting on a building going out of New York City. Good to finally know what it means. There you go. I'm not sure why somebody would paint it on a building, but there you are. The movement through the movement through these levels of the universe, they require adherence to Jainism doctrines emphasizing a peaceful and disciplined life. These principles include non-violence in all parts of life. And by the way, these guys are the non-violent kings and queens of the planet as I see it. See these covers over their mouths? Now, this is an interesting thing, and it goes back a very long way. They don't all wear them, and you don't have to wear them. But it represents them trying to protect the life, are you ready, of a microcosm. So there's an acknowledgement of, even in the air that they breathe, that they are extinguishing life that goes into their body on some level, even though they don't mean to do that. So that they try to be non-harming. That means any Jain group that owns a business will own a business that hurts nothing as much as they can possibly help it. So it's a really amazing thing. They've got all parts of life as non-violent. There has to be no verbal violence, no physical violence, no mental violence. And of course, if we think about what the world struggles with the most, those would be it, wouldn't it? Verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, whether that's by doctors that are intimidating people into taking pharmaceuticals and whatever, intimidating people into accepting what it is that they're offering, whether that's religion or whether that's a product. It doesn't matter. It's mental abuse. And it's a really tough thing, because you in a modern world need to be able to discern and stand up against all of that. Now, as part of this, they've also got the speaking truth thing. You must always speak the truth. So it does moderate people. If you could imagine all of your friends, now I want you to do all of your friends, all of your family, and you think about people that you know, and think about how would they fare if they suddenly got truthful. I don't mean blunt. I don't mean straightforward, but I mean truthful. If they were really truthful, if they were honest about what they've said and done, that's truthful, right? It's not just about what somebody else is doing. It's about what you're doing. If they were really honest about all of that, their life would go, and I know quite a few spiritual types, their life would go into this massive spiral to start with. Hiya, Jennifer. Because once they started that, people would view the truth of who they are as if that wasn't who they were yesterday, all right, or last week. In other words, we accept dishonesty. We encourage dishonesty if it makes us more comfortable. Some people actively seek dishonesty, and it becomes so threaded into their lives that they don't actually have an awareness of the difference. So they have this truth. Sexual monogamy is a huge part of their religion. So it's not so much chastity as in we can't have sex with somebody. It's more that you don't do that with more than one person at a time. And when you meet a person and you have chosen that person, they've chosen you, you do not indulge any other fantasies in any other part of your life. And of course, the detachment of material things is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's huge for them. So they don't just pay for things, they live it. And that's why I say, I think a lot of religions and spiritualists, and forget any particular one, it includes New Age spiritualists. Most people, to my mind, don't really believe what they are saying in the depths of their soul. If you really believed, for example, that you had to be a good person to go to heaven, you would be a good person. If you believed that to the depths of your soul, if you believed to the depths of your soul you would go to hell for doing wrong things, or you would be punished in some way, whether you're talking karma or whether you're talking something else, you would not do it. So there's a level of disbelief in us. I think we're like little children who think, I can get away with that. I'll get away with that. When you look at these Asian philosophies, and like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they're saying you get away with nothing. You don't get away with anything. And just in case you think you might, we're going to teach you that this isn't the right way to go. And if you can't adhere to that, you can't be with us, because we adhere to that. As part of the disciplined and non-violent lifestyle, they are strict vegetarians, by the way, and often adhere to quite an arduous practice of non-violence, which restricts the sort of occupation. So we're talking, they can't even farm, okay? Because if you farm, you can take the milk off a cow, but you can't kill the cow. And you have to treat the cow with a whole lot of respect. They can't do things where insects are harmed by ploughing, so they can't plough a field. Now, clearly, they're going to walk on ants and do stuff. We can't avoid a certain amount of destruction. Farm with an M. They're clearly very mindful. And again, we come into modern spiritual teachings, which says, we have to learn to be mindful. We have to live in a conscious manner. We have to do all of this stuff, and yet nobody really does it. They still go out and buy their plastic, and they still go, you guys shouldn't do this. Whereas these people are their own shining example. They don't tell people not to do it. They just don't do it themselves. And when you think about that, living the way of example, that's exactly what the Jina are all about. I don't preach this. I teach this. I live it, and that's how I teach it. Well, they try not to, but I mean, let's be realistic here. The day is going to come when you're going to walk on an ant. They're not going to be punished for that, and they understand that, but to the mind in their philosophy, it's the attempt and deliberate conscious attempt to do no harm. So it's that intention. You are never going to get away without doing harm. It's just never going to happen. Having said that, there's an interchange for that. But they must be about the healthiest people on the planet when you think about it. Their Jainism, their ethical system is based on the idea that right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct must be cultivated simultaneously. So you don't go and just learn this over here and then be bad over there, which is very much the modern religion, isn't it? It's like you can go to church on Sunday and you can be a prick the rest of the week. And somehow that makes it okay. You can go and, if you're a Catholic, you can go and kill a person, you can rape a person, you can do despicable things and walk into a little cubicle, confess your sins, and you're okay. You don't have to live the right way, which tells me there's very little belief in the right way. It's an amazing phenomenon when we start thinking about it. And it mustn't be easy to live. If you just think of vegetarianism, like being a true vegetarian, being a true believer of doing no harm, you're talking not having carbs. You're talking a lot of interesting things. It's a unique principle because non-violence is preached in religions, but they make it a common practice. It's extended. It's so unique that all living beings or jivas on Earth, which include soil, oceans, microbes, and plants, they only eat products of the living that belong to something that's like, for example, they eat the apple and the tree is left alive, so that's okay. And that's their whole philosophy. So, of course, it's sustainable living before that got popular. If you can eat the fruits off those trees, if you can eat the byproduct of the cow and you're looking after the cow or the goat or whatever, but you don't eat the meat itself. You don't kill anything to eat it. So it's kind of fantastic when you look at it. Some Jains, I mentioned before about the masks, and I really like the idea about not harming, microbes, because you think, how did they know about microbes 3,000 years ago? Seriously, dude, how did they know? Yet it's in their writings. They do believe, that there is a certain amount of unwanted karma that will come with that. It evolved into a cultural system rather than a belief system, and it's made significant contributions to Indian philosophy, logic, art, and architecture, mathematics, astronomy, and astrology and literature, along with Hinduism and Buddhism. A certain amount of the core or similarities, if you like, can be seen simply by the age. If you go back as far as you can with Jainism, and you're thinking now we're looking 6,000 years back, it's a bloody long way, and how it's influenced Buddhism and Hinduism, which I think is really interesting myself anyway. They're the three most ancient Indian religious traditions still in existence. That's Jainism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Even then, they believe to be an extension, from something so far, so old, that we don't even really have a modern recounting of it. We don't have a text. But they do have texts. And the Jainas, it's kind of interesting because the Jains believe the Jainas impart their knowledge. You're going to like this because I really do. And it is understood in all languages. And when I talked to Rose Rongomairi, I can't remember her surname now, a famous or well-known, New Zealand Māori healer, I can remember her talking about, she would point, she had a wonderful presence. She's quite an old lady, and she lived in the middle of nowhere, and she had a cubicle. Actually, this is kind of cool. She lived in the Yurawira National Park, which is down by Rotorua. It's in the middle part of the North Island. It's full of bush, and it's full of Māori lands, and so people travel through it to go fishing, etc., but there's no real settlements for quite a long or a big space of room. So it's a really natural, beautiful environment. It's a big national park, that sort of thing. So when you listen to Rose, you go to her place like this, you've got to walk. If you're going to go to a healing festival, it'll be closer to where she is and the Yurawira. And of course, people stay in tents and, do that sort of thing for a weekend at the Marariki festival. And she's got a cubicle, and it cracks me up because it's just like the size of a chair and enough room for a stool, and she sits in there and you sit in there in this really close wee space. It's almost like too much. It's almost like you've got no personal space. She's like all around you. But she was talking at a Marariki festival years ago, and she was saying, you could believe in your angel, your archangels, your Archangel Michael. And she says Archangel Michael is part of our tradition as well, only he's not white and he's not an angel. And she is so all-encompassing with that. The Jains are in that same modality, in that same mindset, that we don't have to disseminate. We don't have to say, you've got this guy because you happen to be of the Jewish faith, and you've got this one because you happen to be of the Christian faith, and you've got that one because you're actually Roman Catholic. You don't have to do that. You can look at a master as a master. And as long as it is a master, and as long as you are learning from that master, or that master is teaching you. Does it really matter? And again, we could talk about the introduction of sectarianism, which is really damaging, really dangerous, I think. Quite a cool thing. The sacred texts for the Jains are a compilation of teachings of the Mahavira written in Sanskrit. Now, Sanskrit, it's not written in Sanskrit, sorry. Some of it's written in Sanskrit, and the rest is written in something called Prakrit, which means the natural language. It's a combination of dialects of the ancient Indians. So Sanskrit is ancient too, so it looks like we've got a parallel of dialects coming through, and I'll show you a little wee difference. Now, this symbol I've got here is Jain. It's a Jain symbol, and so this is the thing I really wanted to bring forward. We've got a couple of symbols here to show you, is that in actual fact, we see these things and we don't really know where they come from. Most people just assume anything of this type is Buddhism or Hinduism, mainly Buddhism if you're in the Western world, Hinduism. If you live in Auckland, you know a bit. There's a lot of Hindus in Auckland. But again, Hinduism, you see, is a non-violent. Hinduism, they don't eat meat. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. The writing in the middle is an actual word. So these sacred words, writings, after his death, a schism. After Mahavira died, there was a schism. There was a breakdown between the Jain community, and two major sects were formed, the Shvedambara and the Digambara. And these problems were caused by a disagreement. This is the bit that makes you go, really? We've got this non-violence, we've got this, but we've got this disagreement, which is bizarre, to say the least, because it's bizarre that it broke this sect, this whole organization, if you like, this group, this philosophy apart. And when it did that, I have to ask, okay, so where does that fit in exactly? It was caused due to a disagreement regarding the monastery discipline of the Shventambaras. And of course, it's believed that the monks and nuns should wear white robes, okay? And the Digambaras believed that just like Mahavira, the monks should wander around naked and that a female can't be a nun because she cannot attain liberation. So you might not like that wee bit. So us chicks, we're destined on the one group of the Jainism to forever be reincarnating. When that sounds, well, what would we call that, sexist, the reasoning in there is actually quite simple. We need women to give birth to men. And it's a very logical thing, although the question becomes, so are you telling us then that the liberation from reincarnation, while you're desiring it, women shouldn't desire it? It's a very interesting question. I find that kind of meaty, what's going on here. Because they couldn't come to an agreement, and clearly I think a part of that agreement would have been a certain amount of men going, we're not wandering around naked. We're over that. That the others felt that if you were to live the Jiva's teaching, you had to go through that. You had to go through that, putting it all aside. I think too, as time goes by and they've gotten to more modern histories, we've now got more religion. You've got a group of people that are being told that to be naked is also to be primitive, right? Which is how traditionally they've been treated. We're not talking 1950s, and even then they would have treated it as primitive. So being naked was never considered. But they call it naturism. And, of course, we've got naturism as a part of modern society. There are whole naturist groups out there who are vegetarian, who wander around naked, who believe that the body is the temple and that they need to be liberated. And they consider the wearing of nothing, the lack of wearing clothes, to be part of that liberation. So that was interesting. So it broke them into two completely separate well, I think it depends where you live too. Like if you're going to wander around in India, which tends to be kind of warm, being naked is probably not a big deal. But if you're going to wander around anywhere that it gets kind of cold, like Canada, New York, it's probably a problem, But then the reason for wearing the clothes is not survival, I suppose. And that's what they're saying, If you're wearing it to cover up, if you're wearing it to fit in, because clothing does do that, Did you almost join a nudist camp? What stopped you, Kathy? So it's a very interesting aspect. So they ended up with this separation from the Orthodox Jain council because they forced themselves to separate. The number of Jains Are you ready? It's over 4 million followers. That's huge, and that's not Hindus, or even though it is confused with Hinduism and the Western world can't. It's like the Western world goes, oh, you all look the same. But they've got 4 million followers. That's all of New Zealand, nearly. Not quite, but nearly. Jain symbolism is incredibly precise, and that's the first thing I notice about it. These are ancient symbols, by the way. They're not modern symbols at all. It's so precise, I can't help but correlate that to currently used healing and intention symbols. When you also think of spell rituals, mantras, and affirmation practices, I'm drawn back in time myself to an understanding that repeating positives to yourself in a lyrical way changes the way your body feels, your eyes see, and the way your ears hear, and it really kind of does. So this is the hand. Okay, it's got a really big long ass name, so I'm not even going to try it. Actually, it's called ahimsa, and that's the word inside here. Okay, it's ahimsa, not hamsa. AIMSA. It means non-injury, and the hand is put up for the word stop. Okay, so if you're thinking about doing any damage, just stop, is how that goes. The wheel represents the Dharma chakra, which of course is duty and obeyances, and of course it stands for the resolve to halt the samsara through relentless pursuit of ahimsa. So samsara is the destruction, not bad, destruction of the world. The next symbol that we've got, which is going to show you, I have to make this a bit larger possibly, going to show you, there's our swastika in here, and the swastika represents the separate thoughts of heaven, human, animal, and hell, because there is a hell, but they circle around each other. So this is their comprehension of the universe. This, of course, is your non-violence symbol. Now here we have right faith, right conduct, right knowledge, really precise symbology going on. Here we have the 4 states the soul may live in, which is human, animal, and hell. And then, of course, we've got at the top, this little circle here is the abode of the liberated soul. That's Siddha Loka. Now, Loka is universe, right? So if you remember that, Loka always means universe, and it's in reference to one of the universes. Now, the shape of the universes is this outside bit. In actual fact, they say the universe is shaped like this, like a man standing with his legs apart and his elbows on his hips. And when you look at that, that's exactly what it does look like. Now, they believe that that is what the universes are shaped like, which I think is phenomenal, that they've determined that there is a shape. 3,000 years ago, at least, they determined that there is a shape to the universe. It's a really interesting thing to me. I really find it hard to get past that. I'm mind-boggled whenever I think about that. Not because I think that we're in some kind of super intellectual anything. Well, he did, but when he corrupted it, the thing is that they still use it, I guess. And so we can determine what we're looking at. We can either look at the Jain symbol, okay, or we can look at the Hitler's use of that symbol. That's all I got. He did the goose step march, which is very challenging and difficult, but it showed that he had blind obedience. And he did the hail thing, which had been around for centuries, if not thousands of years already. But this is a modern and consistently used symbol, so I would prefer to look at it this way. If I see a flag with some bald, white-headed guys with pit bulls, hanging around them, no, this is right. No, this is exactly what it's like. Yeah. When you rotate that, you may find this interesting. If you rotate that, you're going to end up with what looks like a vortex, by the way. It's going to look like an actual vortex. In fact, I'm going to make that. I'm going to show you all. If you start rotating a swastika, you end up with a vortex which looks very much like a chakra, it looks very much like a universe or a vortex out in space. You end up with that sort of look to it because it's got the angles on it. It turns into a circle when it's moving, by the way. Thankfully, we do. Now, this is another huge symbol for Jains. This one is their Om, okay, A-U-M, and it's actually pronounced like this. Just so as we get it. I hope you enjoyed that. Buzz. So every part of it has a meaning, and this is again that precision. This is the precision that you see in not all, but especially the older symbols of healing symbols. The tendency is to make them all Asian, but some of them look distinctly non-Asian. So it's become more of a convenience. So when you have a look at it, these are their 5 principles: Siddha, Aranta, Arachneya, Upadhyaya, and Sadhu. And each symbol pertains to a part. When I do the Taku rays, when I do the Daikomyo, when I do the Honshazi Shonin, I know what each part of that actually means, what the word is that's associated with each part of it. And that matters because now that one symbol represents a group of words that have an intention or a meaning, and this is the same. So when they say then they are talking about, well, I'll do a show on symbols so I can show you that. With this is their 5 precepts, and their 5 precepts are to do no harm, and they start with the do no harm to others, to do no harm to animals, to do no harm to spirit, and that's their 5 principles, and they repeat this every day. They start their day with it, which is pretty awesome. Now, if you have a look, we go down here. There's the A-U-M, the actual words. You can go look it up too, by the way. You can go and look up the Sanskrit symbol, their 5 laws, their 5 rules, and see what they say. Sorry, I'm running out of time right now. But it's a very fascinating thing, and this is what they chant every morning when they get up. Now, you've got something now that's reminding you, and that's how I see symbology of all sorts. It reminds you of something as a collective, and when you tone that, when it comes out of your body, then it carries some serious weight because you are putting that into your word. I was talking to somebody today about going to a temple in Bangkok, and when I sat there, you hold onto a string. It's very lovely. You go into the temple, and it's got this wonderful air. You're sitting in a building, because I'm in New Zealand, there's nothing really old here, and I know I'm sitting in a building that is venerated. People don't go there to be saved. They go there to, yes, they want to be blessed, but also they go there to give. And so you've got this energy, and these monks sit here and do these intonations, these prayers. You've seen the prayer wheel? They go through every prayer in that wheel every day. And then what they do is you've got all of these people that make Buddhas and little insignias, and they bring them into the temple, and they sit up on a pedestal in the middle, and they run this string all the way through them so it touches everything. Then they run it around, attaching it to the sides of the building. So when you go in, you've got to step over it. It's like the little cat's cradle things that you make with string on your fingers. You got to step over all of these bits, and when you step over them, you get to move to a point of there's enough room to sit down. So you sit down in the middle and you hold on to the string. And when the monk comes along, he's already sitting there. When he comes along, he's holding the other end of the string. And it goes round the outside of the building too, by the way, for anybody that can't come inside or can't fit inside. And it was full, by the way. They can hold on to the string outside. So everybody gets the blessing. And the monk starts to chant. And there's an echo. This building is built for this echo, for these beautiful acoustics. When you hear that, it's phenomenal. It would not sound the same outside. It would not sound the same in a hall or in a building. It would not sound that same sound anywhere else. It's built for in the space. There's a lot of gold, there's a lot of very tiki type wood. I'm not really adept on the wood. There's dirt. There's these wonderful energies that are flowing through this place. And as you're holding onto the string, I certainly could feel it coming through me. And it was just like surrounding me. So I was actually in bliss for about the 10 minutes that it lasted as he's got his prayer wheel and he starts spinning it. What he does is he reads every single prayer on that prayer wheel. He chants every single character, and he doesn't stop till it's finished. And then once it's finished, the whole thing just goes down to and then you just feel the tone going through this whole room, and everybody is just still. That's all I got for it. They're just still. It's very beautiful, absolutely stunning. It was one of the most significant moments because feeling that was unique. I'd never felt anything like it before. And you can see how people want that. I can see, why wouldn't you want that as part of your day? You go along at 10 o'clock every day for 10 minutes. You sit in this beautiful space. It's cool. It's lovely. It's got this wonderful energy to it. Nobody talks to the monk, by the way. He just sits there and does his thing. But it's this most reverence, I think, is the word I'm looking for. Not reverence of the monk necessarily, but it's the whole place has that feel to it. It's just absolutely beautiful. When you go in, everybody's babbling and talking, and you can still feel it through that. And then when they sit down, now this is another indication of the jhana. This is one of the jhana, and of course this is what they call the dismissing of the body, is that stance right there, that you stand there like that and you hold that stance. And in transformational breathing, and when I was learning certain meditation, hypnotherapy techniques, and then later when I was teaching them, the first thing that I really did notice is that if you want a true visionary experience or a true transformative experience, you do have to let the body go. So I can see where that comes from. And there are lots of people who have been teaching it ever since, is letting that body go. And then you can have these experiences. You can have these mind experiences. You can let that DMT molecule free in your little brain so that you can go and enjoy these wonderful experiences. And then you return to consciousness, not return to your body. You return to a state of being here, as opposed to being everywhere, if that makes sense. And it's a lovely sensation to feel like you're kind of everywhere. Quite a regular one. Now, I had to put this in here because this is a jinn, right? And when you learn about the Jains, you do ask yourself, okay, we've got the genie in the bottle thing going on. They're known as jinn. They always look Asian, right? They always look Indian. They've got quite often an Indian look to them, or Tibetan style look, Mongolian, definitely ethnic. And I can't help but wonder if the word jinn comes from jhana. If that's this. We've got this genie. You let the genie out of the bottle, and what does he do? He gives you these wishes. He's got the power to grant you wishes. But part of that power is you understanding that you have to know enough to make the right wishes, right? You've got to make the good wishes, or you get visited on by some seriously bad karma, right? If you say, I want all the money in the world, it could get dumped on you and you could suffocate from it. If you say you want a nubile young man, woman, young man in my case, to fall in love with you, you could find yourself with a son. You could find yourself pregnant and giving birth to it's like there's a little trap in there. And so I can't help but think that there's got to be some, you take your chance. Oh, so funny. Jenny. So I really think that there must be some correlation between that. I didn't go looking for it, but it started playing on my mind, and I thought I'd pop it into the show just because. But jinn authors interpret the word to mean, literally, beings that are concealed from the senses. Isn't that gorgeous? So we put them in a lamp, we put them in a bottle, but that's a story, and that's a story that we've familiarized ourselves with. But there was a time before that where there were always these entities that were considered larger than life that could appear, and we could learn from them, or if we did the right thing, if we knew the right thing to do. And of course, in the stories of more recent times, is rubbing the lamp 3 times or whatever. If we know the right things to do, then we can bring this power into our lives. We can bring this entity into our world, into our lives. And I thought I'd show you this because this is an actual look at the I've forgotten how to say it again. This is Prakrit. This is the Prakrit language, and it's the Kapil Sutra, which is the writing. It's a really interesting thing. Look at that beauty. The beauty of this is just mind-boggling, isn't it? Look at those colors and the uniformity of the language. You see that I learned in Thailand, by the way. I didn't learn this anywhere else because they write very much like this. They have 120 odd letters, and they're trying to reduce that down now because it's very hard for us to understand. They've got 120 odd characters, I should say, and they don't put gaps or punctuation, so they just write everything. Okay, or it's that way and that way. They just write everything. And it leaves it open to your interpretation to a certain extent. For example, I love doing it. I love writing out stuff without punctuation. Everybody gets pissed off. But I'm like, work it out. You know, you were taught, right, at school, so you know how to formulate a sentence. And it's a shame to me that we teach people how to think by adding those bits to it. It's pretty easy to know what a person means. Sure, you can play with it. But this whole nation of people, and a number of nations of people, do all of their reading and writing without punctuation, without gaps between words. So, but the person reading it seems to always get that right. There's no misinterpretation. In the Thai language, there's no word for ugly, for example. There's no word that says no. There's no one word for no. You can say, I don't want this, but you can't just go no. And I think we've developed a little bit of a lazy language. And of course we've got, this is part of the actuals as well. And they're so gorgeous. Look at that. Ancient, ancient, ancient. Faded, but you know, can you imagine how beautiful that would be? There's your gold. There's always the gold in them. And see, here's this symbol. Now, can anybody tell me, I bet you can, what usually you see the same representation of this symbol with the circle underneath? Usually it's got the circle underneath or on top. Or you can go away and have a think about that anyway. It's just so beautiful. Now, that was really good fun. I love the Jains. I love what they represent. I love the purity, I guess, of their philosophy. I also love the fact that their philosophy introduces non-harm into modern spirituality, because it's certainly not in modern religion, right? Next week we're going to be looking at the Druids. So we're going to have a bit of fun with the Druids. There's a lot of stuff in there. And there's some things that are a little bit less expected than what most people think of. So that should be absolutely fabulous. So thank you, everybody, for coming. It was a fun time. I hope you enjoyed it. Catch us next week for the Druids. Ciao for now. Remember, this week, don't be a part of your own problem.